Hello, all. We are Group Resilience, and today we are going to be talking about how that affects leadership. So, what is resilience? Resilience is the capacity to recover and adjust to adverse situations. It's the ability to overcome the face of hardship and push through to your overall goal. So, today we're going to talk about how important this trait is for a leader, and a little bit more about other leaders that operate this way. So, resiliency is a key character trait among the most successful leaders. Those without the trait lack the drive to push through the low points of leadership to achieve greatness.
There are three models of resilience. The compensatory model represents resilience as a factor that neutralizes exposure to risk. This includes optimism, empathy, insight, intellectual competence, self esteem, direction or mission, and determination and perseverance. The challenge model shows a risk factor can enhance a person's adaptation, making the individual more prepared for the challenge. This is only true if the risk factor is not too extreme. In the protective factor model, there is an interaction between protection and risk factors. This reduces the probability of a negative outcome and moderates the effect of exposure to risk. This model comes from the systems theory. Protective factors foster positive outcomes and healthy personal characteristics despite unfavorable life circumstances. The protective factors in this model are emotional management, interpersonal reflective skills, ability to restore self esteem, planning, life skills, and problem solving. Hardiness is an individual's ability to make the best of a difficult circumstance. There are three dimensions of hardiness. The first is being committed to finding meaningful purpose in life. The second is belief that one can influence their surroundings and the outcome of events. The third one is the belief that can learn and grow from both positive and negative life experiences. The construct of hardiness refers to the constellation of personality characteristics. The function as a resistant resource in the encounter with stressful life events. Hardiness reduces the appraise of threat and increases the expectations of coping effectively. It can also be seen as having control over one's environment. Internal variables of resilience include, but are not limited to, the following listed. Internal variables are defined as self or personality factors that have a significant impact on how a person interprets and deals with the crisis at hand. The higher the level one has from these variables, the higher their resilience. External variables involve centrality of relationships and social support. How successful one's relationships are and how strong their support systems are affects resilience. So someone who has a weak support system or weak centrality of relationships would not have a strong sense of resilience. Organizational resilience refers to an organization's ability to create an environment that enhances career resiliency of their employees. Studies show that leadership development is gained and shaped through the active engagement in hardship or obstacles. Overcoming obstacles builds a competency to successfully deal with and bounce back from adversity. In resilient organizations, when going through a difficult time, restructure themselves to attain a mission. This mission is to provide feedback, set goals, and gather intelligence. The organization employ people who can react quickly and efficiently to change and perceive experiences constructively. This process of going through hardship helps shape leaders by building the person's competency to successfully handle any problems they may encounter.
Now that we've taken some time to get a better understanding of what a resilient leader is, we want to take a minute to do a reflection. We want to use this time to have you write down 3 ways that you could be more resilient in your day-to-day life, whether that be academically, professionally, or even socially. Now that you've reflected on a few ways that you can improve your resiliency as a leader, we want to talk about a couple recommended practices. The first is trusting yourself and believing that you're on the right path. The second is embracing change rather than fighting it. The third is keeping a positive attitude. The fourth is setting specific goals. The fifth is breaking those specific goals into specific segments. Seeking support from your community. And lastly, not ignoring the negatives.
We're going to look at a few real-world examples of resiliency, starting with looking at a couple companies that have faced some hardships and overcome those hardships. And as a leader in a company, whether you're the CEO or the manager, resiliency is going to be an extremely important trait to have, because at any time that your company is having any sort of problem, all the employees, their eyes are going to turn towards the leader. And if the leader is positive and expresses new ideas or ideas for change or adapting to whatever it is, and if they set goals and work hard to accomplish those goals, the employees are going to do the same thing. But if the leader's negative about the whole situation, the employees are going to follow that, and they're most likely not going to overcome those hardships. So we'll start by looking at Old Spice. Old Spice is a men's product line. They have deodorants, aftershave, things like that. So their sales started to really decline because younger markets weren't buying their products anymore. They were seen as an older brand, the brand of your father, something like that, and they just weren't selling nearly as well as they used to. So if you look at the top left, you see one of their older ads, and this kind of embodies that exact idea. It says, your father wore it, your father's father wore it, hell, Father Time wore it. And then if you look at the top right, you see completely different advertisement. It looks crazy. This is probably what you're used to seeing when you see Old Spice commercials. These crazy advertisements are really eye-catching. So when the company realized that their sales were dropping, they turned to a big advertising company, Wieden & Kennedy, and they asked them to completely remarket their brand, revamp it, just give a new face to it, and that's what they did. And after they did that, it's a whole new image. No one thinks of Old Spice as being an older person's product. The youth has really embraced it nowadays. So this really shows resiliency and adaptation to new markets. They were willing to drop what they had, completely change up for the betterment of the company. So now we're going to look at another one, Pabst Blue Ribbon. So in the late 1990s, early 2000s, this beer company, their sales had drastically decreased. In 2001, their sales were an all-time low, and they knew they needed to change something up. The leadership at the time wasn't making those changes, or maybe they just couldn't make those changes, so they brought in 2 new guys, Brian Kovalchuk and Neil Stewart. And at the time, Neil Stewart was only 27 years old, so they were really embracing the youth. So once these guys were in there, they did a lot of research, and they found out who was still drinking their beer. And they realized that it was the so-called hipster crowd in the early 2000s. So they went out to these people and they asked them, why are you still drinking this beer over other beers? And they kind of universally answered that all the other beer companies had these flashy advertisements, these kind of crazy commercials, but Pabst Blue Ribbon was really just selling their beer. They were basic, they were simple, they just did what they did, and they weren't flashy about it. So instead of really changing things up, kind of like Old Spice did, Pabst Blue Ribbon decided to really embrace their base. And instead of starting new advertising campaigns, they had smaller venues where they would invite people to the venues, younger people, and they really rebranded themselves as a younger cultural brand. And now they're doing better than ever before. They've done a great job with this. So this one was a little bit different type of resiliency. They changed up by bringing in younger culture, but at the same time, they also stuck to what they had. They stuck to their base, and they just kept going with that. So now we're going to look at Netflix. Netflix, everybody knows what it is. It's grown tremendously within our lifetimes. It's almost an everyday thing for everybody nowadays. Everybody has Netflix or knows what Netflix is, has seen Netflix. It's almost a part of everyday life at this point. Back in 2011, they did have a pretty big failure. So what they tried to do was split up the subscriptions between the DVDs and the streaming service. And then the DVD subscription was going to be a little bit more than it is now, or it was then. And a lot of people were really upset about this. The investors were upset, the subscribers were upset. They lost 800,000 subscribers within one quarter. That's just crazy amounts of profit loss, crazy amounts of backlash. And Netflix realized that they were making a mistake. They couldn't do this. So they publicly said that they were not going to do this. They canceled it completely. They apologized. And now they're once again doing better than ever. They're really revolutionizing the entertainment industry. They've got their own TV shows, they've got their own movies, and they're doing tremendous. And this again shows a different type of resiliency. In Netflix case, they didn't necessarily change up, they instead reversed the change that they were trying to make. But they stuck with what they knew. They showed that they had a good thing going to begin with. And they apologized, they went back to that. They showed resiliency and they kept going with their company despite this problem. Next, we're looking at another big company that I'm sure you've heard of, Nintendo. So in the early 1980s, throughout the 1990s, Nintendo was doing amazing. They had the Mario games, they had the Donkey Kong games, the Nintendo 64, all those things. And it was really popular, but they were kind of aimed at more of a family-friendly, younger crowd. And then in the early 2000s, other gaming systems came out, such as the Sony PlayStation and the Microsoft Xbox. And these were supposed to be more advanced gaming systems, a little bit more diverse in their games, and aimed at a little bit more of an older crowd, not necessarily adult, but teenage, things like that. So Nintendo tried to keep up with this new era of gaming, and they came out with the GameCube. And they tried to stray away a little bit from their family-friendly children's type games, but it didn't really work because the problem was the GameCube wasn't as advanced as these other systems, and it's largely considered to be a failure on Nintendo's part. So, like Netflix, they had to take a step back and realize that the direction that they were starting to move in was a mistake, and they reversed what they were doing. They decided they didn't really need to keep up with these other gaming systems because they really did have a unique platform. So they came out with the Wii, they came out with the Nintendo DS, and they stuck to what they had before. They went for the family-friendly, younger crowd, and once again, they're doing amazing. Almost everybody has a Wii or knows what a Wii is. And again, Nintendo showed great resiliency. They overcame their hardships, and they did it similar to Netflix by taking a step back, admitting that they made a mistake, but then moving forward from that. So we've seen a few different companies take different approaches to resiliency, whether that be completely changing, as in Old Spice, or staying with the same stuff, like Nintendo. But all of them have showed great resiliency, and they're doing better than ever because of their resilient leaders.
All right, so after giving you guys a few examples of corporations and businesses that used resilience in order to become a success, we wanted to focus on individuals that also have used resilience to become a success. So first one to hit it off is Michael Phelps. He's an Olympic swimmer. He's the most decorated athlete in the history of the Olympics. 23 out of his 28 medals were gold. So throughout his career, he had a lot of success and was a very fortunate athlete. Now, early on in his career, he did face some challenges. He was put in the spotlight outside of the Olympics for the first time. He was actually shown using marijuana, which the public did notice, and a lot of people did have negative views, but it wasn't that big of an impact at the time. It was kind of just brushed under the rug. The biggest issue came after the 2012 Olympics when he announced his retirement after the London Games. 2 years after that, he was charged with a DUI in September 2014, right outside of Baltimore, which was immediately brought to the media, a lot of negative attention, and a lot of people question, how could someone as great as Michael Phelps hit such a low point as drunk driving? So Michael Phelps had to come out and make an apology to the public and almost had to redeem himself. He actually started training and swimming again and decided to return to the Olympics one final time to redeem himself and his image. So throughout the struggle, he did lose sponsorships, but he was able to swim in Rio and be as successful as he was before in the past, and he really redeemed himself, showing people that he was able to kind of get his way out of rock bottom and climb back and become successful once again. Now, the second individual that we're going to discuss here is Elon Musk. So Elon, starting off, he was just a student at the University of Penn. He then moved on to graduate school at the University of Stanford. Now, he did leave University of Stanford early to pursue his dream of creating businesses. About his third business in was PayPal, which is the most popular one that we'd recognize at first. After a few years of working with PayPal, he did sell them to eBay, in which he received $180 million for his share. But the crazy thing about that is, just because he received $180 million, this man's goal was to invest in companies that would change the future and have these new technologies and new abilities. So it costs a lot of money. So $180 million wasn't that much. But after getting away from PayPal and SpaceX, Musk turned his eye to motor companies, and the first one they looked at was Tesla Motors. He invested a large amount of money into the company, but the projection price was actually doubled, which was where the first big problem came in. So Tesla's Motors projected their first vehicle to be around 42,000, but it ended up being about 95,000. So this led to Musk having to make drastic decisions. He had to cut costs. He had to maneuver around a lot of obstacles to keep Tesla's success. One of the obstacles he had to go around was actually cutting people from their jobs. He had to lower his employment rate, and he lost a lot of employees from it. This is kind of an example where you see a leader having to make a tough decision that actually affects others in a negative manner in order to keep himself afloat. So this is kind of an example that you don't really see a lot, but it does exist and it is out there. But sure enough, Elon Musk was able to get through it, and now Tesla today is a huge success and is still building. Now, the third most favorite individual we have here, for my part, is Earvin Magic Johnson Jr. He was a National Basketball Association player for the Los Angeles Lakers. Throughout his career, he had a tremendous amount of points, rebounds, and assists. Was a very, very good young athlete. Now, his career did end early in 1991 because he tested positive for HIV. Now, at the time in 1991, if people were diagnosed with HIV, it was basically a death sentence. If you had HIV, you only had so long to live, and you were not going to have a very long life. The cool thing about Magic Johnson is he's still alive today. He was able to fight his battle against HIV and live. But now, once retiring from basketball, he had to turn and put his goals on something else. He had to figure out another way to be successful. So what he did was he started looking into sports analysis and being a businessman, and he was able to take off. Now you see Magic Johnson not only talking about sports, but he's actually the GM of the Los Angeles Lakers. So he was able to give back to the game in a different manner. Just because he couldn't play anymore, he still found a way to be successful and battle that challenge. Now last, we have Christopher Paul Gardner. Now at first, this man might not seem extremely popular to, but a lot of people do know this man. It's just played by somebody else. So this man was reenacted by Will Smith in the movie The Pursuit of Happiness. A lot of people have seen it, and it's about a man who basically struggles in San Francisco through the everyday battles of trying to compete in the business world and trying to get on top to have a successful life. Now through the 1980s, Gardner struggled with being homeless from time to time, and he had to raise his son. They were out on the streets of San Francisco and having a very tough time, but he did what he could do for his son. Now, basically, Christopher Paul Gardner started off as a salesman, and he just wasn't able to make enough money. And it came to the point where he actually saw a stockbroker one day and thought that that man was so wealthy, that's what he needed to do. That's what could make his life happy. So he starts training, and throughout it, he had to get into interviews, and he had to actually drop jobs in order to take on full-time training to become a stockbroker, to the point where he was actually able to create his own firm, Gardner Rich & Co., which ended up being extremely successful, and now he's a very, very wealthy man. Even on, once he got past his stockbroker career, he moved on to being a motivational speaker. And now he travels around the world today speaking to different countries, all of these different people from all walks of life. And he's actually spoken in 50 different countries. So here's an example of a man who had something very, very little, saw a goal that he wanted, and was able to work through the obstacles and use resilience to fight his way to the top and grind and get to the goals that he wanted to complete.
All right, so one other example that I'm going to present to you guys is another athlete, Roger Federer. He's a tennis player. He's been playing since '98 at the age of 16. He is considered one of the greatest all time. He's won a total of 19 Grand Slam titles, 95 World Tour titles. He's won 6 year-end championships, and currently holds the world record for longest number one in the world. He's had a great year. He's been at the top of the game since '98, but like they say, when you're at the top, all you can do is go down from there. Back in 2013, he went through a few illnesses and sicknesses that kept him out for mostly near the end of the season. Not really too much, but it was kind of the start of like a really rough few years for him. In 2014, the sicknesses. He actually develops mono at a later age, which was kind of weird for someone that old. But he also developed a few other illnesses they didn't share public, so that kept him out for most of the year. In 2015, he switched teams, so he got a new coach, got new equipment. So that was a lot of change he had to go through, considering he had kept the same team since he was 16 years old. So that had to be really hard for him and emotional for him to have to just tell them, hey, I'm going to go with somebody new. I don't need you anymore, considering where his team did get him. And then in 2016, he went through back and knee surgery. So, again, same thing, kept him out through most of the year. And during this time period, a lot of people were saying, like, oh, he's done. He needs to retire. He's too old. I mean, he's 36 now, so that is kind of old for professional tennis. But actually, in the off season of 2016, he really got himself together and did a lot of fitness work and training, and really, he said, got back the drive that he had when he was younger. So it really showed in the 2017 season. He not only won 2 out of the 4 majors, he gained his 1,000th career win, which was incredible. I mean, how many people can say they've won 1,000 matches? And now it even carries over now into 2018 with the Australian Open. He is on to possibly win a 20th Grand Slam title. So I think what this really shows, this is a perfect example of resilience, going through a hard period in his life, having so many people doubt him and saying, like, he was great, but he's too old, but he's this, but he's not where he used to be. He really showed resilience, and he proved that age doesn't matter, that so long as you have the hard work and dedication, you can go as far as you need to go and wherever that may take you. So, in conclusion, with everything we've shown to you guys today, everything from our examples to the models of resilience, I think it's very clear that we can prove that resilience is an important quality for leaders to have. And also, I would add, as a human being in general, because with resilience, it's important to have, because you're always going to have low points in your life, and in general, you're going to have moments where you doubt yourself, where you're going to have hard times where you just think you can't do something, or things are going to get in your way. But so long as you have resilience, and you're willing to work past those trials and tribulations, resilience is important, because it's a quality where you say, hey, these are hard times, but it's not going to stop me from getting where I want to go or where I want to be and what my goals are. And that's really important because no matter what in life, nobody has a perfect life. Nobody doesn't go through struggles. Everybody um, has hardships. So I think to a certain degree, I think everybody has resilience, but it's the people where when they're really beaten down and they really at moments should doubt themselves and they just say, no, I'm not going to doubt myself. And I'm really going to push through because I want to get to this goal and this is what I want with my life.